Hello everyone, and welcome to another very exciting game from round 8 of the London Chess Classic. The game was played between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi, and I'm sure you all heard about Paul Morphy. You know, what's the first thing that pops into your mind when you think Paul Morphy? Probably, chess god, the greatest chess force of that era. But even the great Paul Morphy had a nemesis that he simply couldn't defeat. And that person is Louis Paulsen. Morphy had a terrible score against Paulsen. Of all the games they played eight games in classical time format. Louis Paulsen won five games, Morphy won only one, and they drew 2 games. And even a great chess force today, Magnus Carlsen, has a nemesis, and his name is Jan Nepomniachtchi. Carlsen and Jan played, this is their 8th game so far in classical chess, and Jan won 4 games and they drew 4 games. So Magnus Carlsen never defeated Jan Nepomniachtchi in classical time format. So let's see this game. Carlsen has the white pieces and he plays knight to f3. And okay, to Carlsen's defense, he's been sick for 3 days now, and his game against Hikaru was a lost endgame that he managed to save with a draw. He was lost against Michael Adams. He managed to win that game, but that's just because he's such an unstoppable force. But here he faces Jan Nepomniachtchi, and such moves will not be tolerated. c5 by Nepomniachtchi, we have a Reti opening. c3, d5, d4, c captures on d4, c captures on d4, and knight to c6. Knight to c3, knight to f6, and bishop to f4. Nepo goes for knight to h5, now kicking that bishop back, bishop to d2, and here a very nice psychological move, knight back to f6, saying to Carlsen, it's cool that you developed your bishop to f4, but I kicked it away with knight to h5, and you had to bring it back to d2, to a much less active square. And now if Carlsen would repeat bishop to f4, if he were to bring it to an active square once again, Nepo would simply repeat, probably knight to h5, and offer a draw. But Carlsen has the white pieces. If he wants to win the London Chess Classic, he has to win this game, and unfortunately bishop back to f4 is not an option for him. So after knight to f6, he played e3, and okay, it's already a small psychological victory for Nepo, making that bishop stay on d2 and not being active on f4. e6, bishop to d3, bishop to d6, and e4 now. D captures on e4, knight captures on e4, attacking the bishop, and bishop back to e7. Carlsen castles, Nepo castles, and queen to c2. And we have h6. h6 is a very useful move, as the queen and bishop were eyeing that h7 pawn. Now that the pawn is on h6, it will no longer be a target in the future. Also, it stops either of the knights from jumping to g5. Rook a to d1, bishop to d7, a3 now, stopping this knight from ever infiltrating with knight to b4, harassing the bishop and the queen. Rook to c8, knight to c3, a6, queen to c1, and we have rook to e8. Rook f to e1, bishop to f8, and we have now bishop back to f4. And okay, Carlsen now has his bishop on f4. b5, queen to d2, and b4. A captures, knight captures, and knight to e5. Nepo captures Carlsen's bishop on d3, it's a very strong bishop. Knight captures, queen captures, and a5 now. And if you look at this position, it's a pretty equal position. Carlsen's pieces are a bit more active, a bit more towards the center, and Nepo has a bishop pair, but it's a very inactive bishop pair. This bishop on d7 isn't really doing much. The bishop on f8 is definitely not doing much. It's kind of protecting g7, but at the moment g7 doesn't really need protection. So Carlsen plays queen to f3, and here Nepo gets a brilliant idea how to, get rid of probably the only weakness in his position, and it's the bishop pair. Nepo plays bishop to b4, now pinning the knight. We have rook to e3, unpinning with a nice rook lift, and now bishop captures on c3. B captures on c3, and now bishop to a4. This bishop comes into the game with a tempo on the rook. Rook to a1 was played, attacking the bishop, and now bishop to c2. And now Nepo is getting this bishop from d7 to a4 to c2, and now eyeing f5. And from f5 it will be a very active piece. h3, Carlsen knows what Nepo is doing and is preparing g4. Bishop to f5, now Nepo is very satisfied with his bishop on f5, and if Carlsen wants to kick it away, he will have to weaken his king's position with g4. Carlsen doesn't mind, g4, bishop to h7, but even on h7, it's an incredibly active piece. It's slicing the board in half and also controlling b1, so Carlsen can never put a rook on this very nice open b file. c4 now by Carlsen, and knight to d7 by Nepo. It seems like Carlsen just blundered this d4 pawn, but actually he didn't. If Nepo would capture it, queen captures on d4, then rook to d1. After we move the queen, bishop captures on h6. Getting back the pawn. If you capture, then queen captures on f6. It's a winning game for Magnus Carlsen. So after c4, Nepo played knight to d7, and here we have a terrible move by Carlsen. Continuing with something like c5 would definitely give Carlsen the advantage, and you know, it would be a great game for him. He would probably continue pushing, and in the end probably win the game. I mean, this is a position Magnus enjoys playing, but like we said, maybe Carlsen thought that he didn't think Nepo would capture on d4. That would be ridiculous. But he's been sick for the last 3 days. I mean, in all the photos, in all the interview he gives, you can see and hear he's really sick. Knight to d7 by Nepo, and now Carlsen plays knight to c6 with a tempo on the queen, and this simply doesn't work. Nepo plays queen to f6, and here we have knight captures on a5. Seems like Carlsen won a pawn, but we have knight to b6, now attacking the c4 pawn, and this is where things really go wrong. Here Carlsen played c5, and this is simply, this won't do. Nepo plays rook captures on c5, and now if you capture the rook, queen captures on a1 with check. But really, I mean, Nepo said in an interview after the game that he was expecting queen to b7 in this position, but actually Carlsen decided to capture the rook. He played d captures on c5, queen captures on a1 with check, king to h2, and now queen captures on a5. And in this position, the only realistic move for Carlsen is to capture. C captures on b6, getting back the piece, and after queen captures on b6, he would be down a pawn and with a slightly weaker king's position. But you know, it's not a lost game yet. You're the world champion. You have to make us believe anything is possible. But then again, we have to take into account that he's been sick for the past 3 days. Nepo also said this in an interview. Nepo said that he knows in his own experience that when you're sick, you simply can't give your best. So after queen to a5, Carlsen played queen to c6. Now he thought about getting a tempo on the rook, and after the rook moves, only then capturing the knight. But here comes the problem, and this simply loses the game immediately for Carlsen. Queen to a4. Now attacking the queen, also protecting the rook, and if you capture the knight now with the queen, then queen captures bishop on f4 with check. You're down a piece and you're losing this game. So after queen to a4, Carlsen was forced to capture the queen. Queen captures on a4, knight captures on a4, and now simply c6. This pawn, it's a very nice pawn, it's a very nice passed pawn. It will even be protected by the bishop when it reaches c7, but knight to b6, c7 now, and after f6, preparing e5 to block the bishop's defense of the c7 pawn, rook to b3 with an attack on the knight, knight to c8, and in this position Carlsen simply resigned the game, as there is no way. I mean, he's down a piece, a full piece with no compensation whatsoever. The c7 pawn is nice, but it's no compensation, and like I said, in this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, and this is Nepomniachtchi's third win in a row in this tournament, and he's now in clear first place, half a point ahead of Fabiano Caruana, and this is definitely his tournament. Carlsen really, yeah, I mean, he's been sick for the past 3 days, and the past 3 days he's been playing bad chess. I mean, it's not bad chess for any of us. That's brilliant chess, but for him it's bad chess. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure Carlsen didn't, and he was very upset when he gave an interview to Maurice. It wasn't even an interview. Whatever Maurice asked him, he was not very interested. When Maurice asked what happened here, Carlsen just said, you saw everything, you know what happened." And when Maurice asked him what are his thoughts about tomorrow's game, Carlsen just said that he doesn't have any thoughts about tomorrow's game, and he doesn't really care about tomorrow's game. But you know, that's chess. I always say things happen, and but to this day, Jan Nepomniachtchi remains Carlsen's undefeated nemesis, and the result is 4 wins and 4 draws in Nepomniachtchi's favor. So that's the game. I would like to thank Diego Canepa, Michael Auserbauer, Julio Echevarria, and Mark Morris for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. And one very important announcement, the founder of DeepMind, the AlphaZero, you know, you've been checking out lately on my channel, watched one of my videos and retweeted it on Twitter, and he said that it's a very nice video, recommended it to people, so I'm very happy about that. You know, Demis Hassabis, probably you'll never see this video, but thank you, sir. Thank you a lot. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.